want to first take you back in time to when you were in school and you had a project. And what did you do? You gathered around with your colleagues, and probably there wasn't a lot of motivation. There was a lack of interest, perhaps. Maybe someone was shunted off to the side of the project and wasn't really involved. And then there's the teacher, of course. And that teacher, I don't know, is it dismay? Is it horror? I'm not sure what's going on there. And we find that this can also occur when we are in the work environment too. People are distracted. So what can we do as leaders, as managers? How can we get our teams to function? You can rule with an iron fist. And then there's no uncertainty about what's going to happen. When you rule with full autocracy, then you are certain that the project is going to go well because you understand exactly what's happening every step of the way. And it works until you have to go on vacation or you turn your attention away, and then all of a sudden things fall apart. So what do? The reason that this happens is because of uncertainty. And some cultures like to avoid uncertainty. Croatia is one of the leaders of that, including Italy, Slovenia, Hungary, Portugal, Belgium, and 7 other EU countries score 75 or higher on Hofstede's cultural dimension score for uncertainty avoidance. So because of this uncertainty, fear takes hold, and then people try to take control. And that leads to stagnation. There's a better way. Enter free-range management. So I've done over 100 audits of startups for seed, Series A, B, and M&A rounds. There's, as part of Madewithlove. From that, we've learned best practices, and those best practices are theoretical, but you can begin to implement them inside your business. You have to be very careful with how you do that. So free-range management is a structure to do that. It's based in 3 principles, and those principles help you create extreme autonomy. The first principle is resilience. That's really about the safety net. The second is focus. That's the time and the space for individual workers to actually do what they need to do. They're the knowledge people. They're the ones that are the experts. And then wellness. Wellness is about the longevity of the organization. It is a marathon, not a sprint. So we're going to talk about specific processes, and I hope that these are some processes that you haven't heard of and that you can apply to your teams. So let's start with resilience. Resilience is based on outcomes, so not output, but outcomes, understanding those and assessing them. Feedback, positive and negative, being able to provide good feedback, and psychological safety, encouraging the team to have good psychological safety. Outcomes is what we're going to start with. It's the hardest one to do. It's also the most important thing. And what we're talking about here is really looking at results and evaluating results, not based on output, not based on people putting butts in seats and evaluating their time, but instead focusing on the value that they create. So how do you actually do that? It is very hard, admittedly. And I think about it in kind of 2 different ways. First, I look at the quantitative aspects of it, and I'm thinking about metrics that I can apply or learn when I'm assessing the team. And this is really something I do at a team level. I'm not using metrics at an individual level. The second is assessment, which is really about understanding the individual and what specific qualities they bring to the organization. For me, this means defining their job role very clearly. If you're working with engineers, you probably want the engineering levels. So you have junior, meteor, senior, principal, and defining within that structure exactly what those roles and responsibilities are. For instance, if you have front-end and back-end engineers, they're going to be doing similar things. Maybe they have some specializations. And similar for DevOps and for QA, you want to write this stuff down so that people understand very clearly what their job is. And this will come up later when we talk about feedback. There's a system called 9-box grid model. You can see an example of it here. And this is a way to understand how individuals within the team are relating to one another. The performance, again, we'll talk about that when we come to feedback. Potential is the interesting axis here. It's very hard to understand someone's potential and it's really a mix of IQ and EQ. It's not very well understood, I think, from our perspective as leaders and managers. How do you know that someone is going to do well? And what people do is they look at past performance, but that's actually not a predictor of future performance. So there's some consulting group, YSC Consulting. They've created a framework. It's based on surveys. It's called JDI, which stands for Judgment, Drive, Influence. And what they're looking at is determining the judgment that this person has. Are they able to make good decisions? The drive that they have, how are they motivated? And the influence they have, how broad is the scope of their influence? And so using this and using surveys, they can start to evaluate potential. This is something that can fluctuate over time. So someone might be distracted at home and therefore their potential might drop for the short term. And you want to try to understand what team members are really contributing on a long term and the movement that is occurring. Oops, went too fast. Next is feedback. So a lot has been said about feedback. I hope that you're giving people feedback on your teams. I just want to cover a couple of the issues that I see when I'm doing these audits. So the first, of course, is that you use the sandwich model to give feedback, right? You say something positive, something negative, something positive. But this is an anti-pattern. This muddles the conversation. So instead, I use situation, behavior, impact. And what is that? Well, I'll model it for you. This is a framework developed by the Center for Creative Leadership. And the situation I'll use today is during the presentation today, behavior, all the equipment was ready and working, and the impact, I really appreciate that. Thanks, tech team, for preparing everything. You can see that the feedback is very clear. This happened to be positive feedback. It could have been negative, but it's less likely for someone to argue with the feedback because it's not really about your interpretation of events. This is something that happened in a specific situation and the direct impact to you, the individual. And if you model it this way, you'll find much more productive feedback. Another example of a framework you can use for delivering feedback is content pattern relationship. This is from a book called Crucial Accountability with 1 million different authors in the title, so I'm not going to name them. And this is really about what type of conversation you want to have when you're giving feedback. So if it's a one-time event, such as someone being late to work, then we're talking about content. That's the specific problem, and that's something you can address through feedback. Pattern is where it's happening over and over again. And that's where you want to really talk about the fact, it's not the fact that they were late to work, but it's the pattern that's been occurring. And finally, some things might cause you to challenge or question the relationship, in which case you're having a relationship conversation. It's really about trust at that point. I should note that some things such as sexism and racism can go directly to the relationship step. So what kind of question do you have when, what kind of conversation are you gonna have when you're giving feedback? The cadence of feedback is important. I think one-on-ones are often utilized inside companies, but they maybe don't happen frequently enough. Definitely for development teams, I like to see monthly, if not weekly, one-on-ones. And that might sound like a lot, but as a leader, as a manager, your job is to provide enough feedback to people so that they can do their job well. The most important thing is that it's not operational. You're really focused on how they're doing, the relationships they have, what processes are working for them, and performance feedback in both directions. Retros should occur monthly, and many teams say that they have retrospectives, but then when you actually go and talk to them, you find out that, oh, they haven't done retros for the last 3 months because their sprints were overfilled and they were just too busy and didn't have time. Make sure you're doing your retros, make sure you're assigning out action points. And semester reviews, not annual reviews, at least twice a year, you should have very detailed 360-degree feedback. What does that look like? It looks like taking that job description that we built in the start of the outcomes, looking at the specific line items that that person is responsible for, and then they rate themselves, unsure, no, yes, strong yes. And through that, you can then have a conversation. So they prepare this work about a week ahead of time, then you set up a meeting. You, on your side, prepare this with one other person that's a leader, and you go through and you say, okay, you wrote this, you wrote yes, you're doing this, we agree. You wrote this, you said yes, you're doing it, we don't see it that way. And then you can start to have a real conversation about their specific roles and responsibilities. Resilience is we've covered outcomes and feedback. Now we're talking about psychological safety. So psychological safety is the #1 trait of high-performance teams, according to Google's Project Aristotle research. So the question is, okay, we know this, we know it's important, maybe we know what psychological safety is. How do we actually start influencing it? And the first thing you have to do is you have to measure it. So create a baseline and make an anonymous survey, and you wanna then follow this up twice a year at a minimum, maybe quarterly might be better for your team. It's important it's anonymous so that people are really telling you how they feel about the situation at work. And what type of information can you put on this survey? Well, here are some examples. I am treated with dignity and respect every day. I am not afraid to be myself at work. And 2 reverse-coded questions. My mistakes are held against me, and it's difficult to ask peers for help. So you want people to not agree with those ones. You can use a Likert scale with 7 different levels from strongly disagree to strongly agree. And you want to look at this based on specific teams and figure out, okay, within a team this month, this particular question is dropping. Maybe there's a problem there, and I can go take a look at it and try to troubleshoot what's going on. Braving is a structure from Brené Brown in her book, Daring to Lead. It's really about the power of vulnerability. B is setting boundaries, making sure that boundaries that you have are very clear. And as a leader, this is one of the first things you need to do, be very clear about what you're doing within the team. You need to be reliable. You need to be able to have people trust that you're gonna follow through with what you say. Accountability is the A. It's really about holding yourself accountable, not your team members. And when they see that you hold yourself accountable, this will influence them to do the same. V is vault. That's keeping secrets. People need to be able to trust you. So make sure that you're holding sensitive information close. Integrity is doing the right thing instead of doing the easy thing. Non-judgment, N, is really about us versus the problem, a blame-free environment. And the G is generosity. Be generous with your time, be generous with your knowledge. So this is one structure, again, that's from Brené Brown, Dare to Lead, that you can use inside your own organization. You could also hold an anxiety party. This is invented by Daniel Burka. An anxiety party is exactly what it sounds like. You write down your deepest, darkest fears on a piece of paper, you sort them, and then you actually go and you talk to your colleagues about them. I recommend you start with a group of 4 people, and it will take you about 2 hours to work through just a couple of issues. And what you do is you read out loud to your colleagues your deepest, darkest fear about your performance at work, and they hold up a scorecard, just like at the Olympics, from 0 to 5, and generally it turns out to be a 0 or 1. If you have anything, you're gonna discuss it, and you're probably going to see that your fears are not so well-grounded in reality. Everyone put your hands up, please. And go ahead and keep your hand up if this has happened to you at work before. Public critiques and scolding, favoritism, put downs, endless rules applied inconsistently, blaming and shaming. If that's ever occurred to you at work, leave your hand up. Look around here. Look at how many people have their hands up still. This is abuse, according to Dr. Sandra L. Bloom. Why do we allow this to occur in the workplace? As a leader, it is your responsibility to call out abuse. Call it out with your role power that you have. Manager.readme is a creation by Luc Levesque. This is really about a blueprint to who you are as a manager. And what the document contains is a journey, your personal journey, your role, not your title, but your actual role inside the business, and any promises and expectations you have to and from the team. And when someone new joins the company, it's a good time to update it. And this allows people to understand what type of manager you are, what you expect of them. I've extended this because not everyone is a manager, created something called colleague.readme. It's a remix. And I've added personal values to it, and then also the successes and quirks that you might have as an individual. So this is a way that your team can start documenting who they are as people, because that is important to working with colleagues in collaboration. So far we've gone through resilience. This is the most important pillar. This is the safety net. This is what allows you to actually let go and release the responsibility. The Outcomes and feedback and psychological safety are the 3 bits there. So let's look at focus. There is clear tasks, clear priorities, focus strategies, and async collaboration. We're going to start with clear tasks. Playing to Win is a structure from Roger L. Martin and AJ Lafley. It's about developing a very clear strategy in a structured format. There's 5 parts to it. I highly recommend you check it out. It, for me, has unlocked the mystery of like how do you actually do strategy, and it has nothing to do with SWOT matrices at all. OKRs are sometimes used by businesses. I'm not a huge fan of them, but the 2 biggest mistakes I see are that there's just too many of them. That's usually the number one thing. And then the other thing is that they're done at an individual level, not a team level. If you are using OKRs at an individual level, congratulations, you've just siloed every single person on your team. Note that this is not part of assessment. This is part of the creating focus. So we're not using these to actually evaluate people. Double diamond design is an important concept. It's from, of course, visual design and product management. I find that engineers love to build stuff, so make sure you understand the problem space before you jump into the diamond space. This is where double diamond gets its name because it has divergent thinking and convergent thinking in the problem space, and then the same in the solution space. And then betting. As we heard previously, you need to be able to make bets. You need to understand that you don't know the full path, the full solution. So 2 references here are Shape Up by Ryan Singer, and of course the Build, Measure, Learn loop by Eric Ries. These are, you want to develop hypotheses as an organization, and then using that, try to determine what is the right path forward. There's feature passports from Hannes de Holster. A feature passport is essentially a problem definition. So writing everything down on one page. It contains all the information you need to get started, so including some solution ideation as well. And the reason that we want to do this is because software engineers need to understand the context that they're working in. And too often, product managers treat software engineers as simply an executionary force. They say, go ahead and do these JIRA tasks, but that doesn't work in the long run because understanding those JIRA tasks is impossible unless you have the full context. So this is why you need to make sure that you have that problem space well-defined, the research is available, everyone on the team can see it. And you need to chunk work up. The big problem we see here is that the chunk sizes are just way too large. I like to see epics that are days long, maximum, and the specific individual tasks are 3 hours. Why 3 hours? Because you have 2 points of focus time in your day, before lunch and after lunch. And guess what? That's 3 hours long, because we all know that you're not going to work for the full amount of time. Clear priorities. So, of course, you have a roadmap, right? But I challenge you to investigate your roadmap and determine, is it on specific solutions or is it focused on problems and outcomes? If you have a roadmap based on solutions, then it's very challenging to actually change direction later on. So for instance, let's say that there's a lot of traffic in your city. We could put a roadmap item that says expand Main Street, but now we're dedicated to that solution. Instead, if we ask a question, how might we reduce the traffic on Main Street? We have a deep understanding of the problem. It's something we can go and research. And we have the options for other solutions. Instead of just expanding Main Street, maybe we want to introduce public transit. Use a formal prioritization method. I see a lot of companies not doing this. It's just gut instinct. So check out ICE or weighted short jobs first, or even some sort of risk-based management, risk-based prioritization. Generally, as developers and you leading development teams, you want to focus on one most important goal, maybe on a weekly basis or a bi-weekly basis. And then I like to use goal-based stand-ups where instead of hearing people rattle off a bunch of tasks that they maybe completed or maybe didn't complete, pick one goal for one person. Even if it takes 15 minutes, if they accomplish that goal, it's the most important thing that they've done. Everything else is bonus. So some focus strategies. We have individual focus. To do that, you can use the Pomodoro technique. That's where you set a timer for 25 minutes, deeply focus on one thing and one thing only. And then with it goes off, you just have 5 minutes to kind of refresh yourself, pick another task, maybe check your email, and then focus again. Also, have a dedicated workspace. I think that's more common these days. Open offices, they should die because no one can actually focus in an open office. Who says, I'm going to go to the office so I can really focus on my work? I haven't heard that before. Close Slack, get rid of your messengers, and allow your teams to do that as well. I treat Slack completely asynchronous. I've turned off all the notifications. I'm never notified. All the colors are dull. I don't have that red badge pop up because it doesn't actually matter. I'm focusing on a task. I'm going to focus on that until I'm done and then go back and help my team. And for those of you that work at home, you need to set boundaries with loved ones. It's very difficult sometimes, and people don't always understand that just because you're home, you're working. And this is an exercise that you need to continue to try to achieve success with. There's also focus for the team. Preventing unplanned work is the #1 issue here, where you have an idea about what to accomplish during a week, and then of course you get completely distracted by something that no one ever told you about. So you as an organization, you as a leader, need to learn to say no, and you need to empower your engineers to say no. It's so important. You can't even be ethical without the capability of saying no. Otherwise, you have to say yes to everything. So practice saying no. If you do have to accept unplanned work, make sure it's structured. So that could be a ticketing system, but it could also be something where maybe one person on the team is responsible to be on call during the day, and then only one person is interrupted rather than the entire team. Async collaboration is next. We all hate meetings, so just don't go to them anymore. How do you actually do that? You create a shared document before the meeting where everyone is typing their notes about the meeting. What are they planning to say during the meeting? And then other people reply with comments. And guess what? By the time the meeting is supposed to take place, everything's actually solved. Everyone's already added all their comments. Everyone's had their input. Even the introverted people have said something. And then you don't have to have the meeting. You can just cancel it. You can also use the meetings if you do have them as workshops, or perhaps there is some conflict on the team and you need to come to an agreement. Mentoring is very challenging. I think the #1 rule here comes from the Manager Tools Basics podcast, which I highly recommend you listen to if you're overseeing people. And really, it's about the concept of delegation as mentoring. And the rule is that you can only delegate things which you are an expert on. And the reason for that is because you have to coach that person on what they're doing. And if you're not an expert, you can't give them the feedback they need and you can't help them. So for instance, if you're a CEO and you're gonna hire someone to do sales, you're not delegating sales to them. That person is your peer if you are not an expert in sales. If you are an expert in sales, then that person should have responsibility and you can coach them on the things that you need from them. That's focus. Let's go to wellness. So wellness is all about healthy habits, becoming a knowledge-first organization, and building the team. Healthy habits is first. So we want to recharge. I think this is the most important thing. We need to step away. Don't install apps on your phone. Don't install email on your phone. Ignore your work when it's 5 o'clock. That's how you actually create a good work-life balance. Make sure you're sleeping enough. I don't buy into this whole wake up at 6 a.m. and grind. That doesn't work. That's just a way to become fatigued and then create bad work. So make sure you're getting enough sleep. And as a leader, you can create a good environment when it comes to diet by doing things like having fruit baskets or maybe even competitions for activity. There's running apps, there's biking apps, and these sorts of things. Burnout is, of course, the primary topic here. And the way that you're going to deal with this is through your one-on-ones. Make sure that you're keeping a pulse on how the individuals are doing on a team. Make sure that everybody is taking enough holiday, and make sure that you have a generous holiday policy at your business. Of course, that's not such a problem in Europe. In the US, it's definitely a problem. And you can also use Find Your Why from Simon Sinek to align your personal values with the work that you're doing. This is super important because if you don't have alignment with your particular job role, you are going to burn out faster than if you're actually aligned with what you're doing. There's only one you, and it needs to be both work and personal. Knowledge first is all about the flow of information. This is important for the long-term health of the organization. So it's about transparency, it's about a reflex to document, and it's something that everybody needs to do. This is one of the primary traits that we hire for at Made with Love. We look for people that are good communicators and good writers. And 10% time is another way in which you can create value. It's about giving time back to individuals, or it's 20% time some places, but individuals are going, learning new things, doing research, and then from that, they are helping to educate their colleagues. So that's through a blog, that's through a workshop, that's through a lecture. So that's wellness, healthy habits, knowledge first, and build the team. I hope that you, oh, I still have more stuff, sorry. That slide is totally out of order. So hire slow, sorry, I apologize. We have build the team as the last bit here. Hire slow, fire fast. You've heard this adage before. So hire when it's painful, that's what hire slow is about. Fire fast is about being judicious. I agree with that, but I like to put a flip on it. Hire fast and fire slow. And what do I mean by that? You actually have to build a team, so you need to keep people interested in actually joining your organization. If your hiring process lasts 4 months and you have to go through 10 different interviews, you're not going to join your company. You're going to miss out on the best talent. So make sure your process lasts less than 1 month, and use an applicant tracking system so that you can actually give feedback to people at the appropriate steps. Here, it's really also about reducing bias. So what you can do is use rubrics to actually organize each particular interview, make sure multiple people are involved, or even anonymize some aspects of the interview process. For instance, we have a practical test where you actually do some programming work before we'll hire you. We take your Git repository and then we anonymize it, and we have 2 different people do the code review. So they have no idea whose code they're reviewing. This removes a lot of bias. When it comes to onboarding, we found the best way to do that is with a buddy system. And what that looks like is within the first month, the buddy and the new person are meeting every 2 weeks. In the second month, they're meeting once a week. And in the third month, they're meeting twice a month. And this is a way to have that person become impactful very early. So it's about continually checking in on them and making sure they're adapting to the situation at hand. So that's the wellness pillar: healthy habits, knowledge first, and building the team. So once again, the 3 pillars: resilience, focus, and wellness. Build resilience, create focus, and support wellness inside your organizations. I'm Steve Tauber. You can find me at lnk.bio/Steve Tauber and madewithlove.com. Thank you for that.
Give it up for Steve.
I think I ran out of time for questions. I was going to have questions, but
you want to have questions?
I could have questions.
Yeah,
Does anyone have?
You got 3 minutes. Anybody have any questions?
Questions, not stories. Any questions? I have a free book for you if you ask a question.
Ooh.
There's a question.
Yeah, wait, I'll come to you.
Oh, he's there.
Thank you. Do you have some kind of system when picking buddies for people that come?
Yeah, we make sure the person is not on the same team. So what we do is it's someone else in the organization, someone from a different department. Because you're already working on the same project together, probably we don't want that, because you're already, for instance, if you're doing code review or you're pair programming, you're already working very closely together. So we try to pick someone from a different part of the organization. Otherwise, it's fair game. Anybody can be a buddy.
Okay, thanks.
That answer your
Come
question?
get your book.
Yep.
Come get your book.
Any other questions? He's got 3 more books.
I have 4 more books.
I looked. 4?
Yeah.
Okay, you're here, there, and there. I think that's it.
You said hire fast, fire slow.
Yeah.
How do you fire slow?
Oh, yes, fire slow.
You are fired.
Yeah. Firing slow is really about giving people the opportunity to improve their performance. So if you have semester reviews, in theory, during that semester review, nothing is new. It's all been heard before because you've had one-on-ones regularly with the person. You've been giving them feedback regularly. So during that semester review, or earlier if it's something critical, you build a plan with them. How can they recover? These are the expectations. These are where we see that you're not meeting. And therefore, it's their opportunity to actually improve. So really great resource for that is the CEO of Know Your Team, Claire Liu. She has written everything that it is about, running teams, and she has a really nice process for how to actually get through that difficult time.
There's a question here.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
I like this system, but how do characteristics of a certain manager effect of the system being applied?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, so first of all, this is just one approach. I think you have to be very careful when you're implementing new systems, and you need to do it in a very methodical way. I think the big challenge there is that you as an individual, you have to understand that one size doesn't fit all. So Scrum, for instance, I call that agile theater because it's totally not agile. And so the idea is that you can, as an individual manager, you can, first of all, you're gonna have your manager.readme so people understand how you manage. And then with the team members, you're gonna build that rapport, you're gonna build the relationships that you need to actually manage well. So it's really about, maybe this is a non-answer, but it's really about, for each individual manager, understanding the people that you're working with, because relationships are the defining characteristic of business. That's what we're doing. We're working together, right? There's a famous quote that says, no matter how it seems at first, it's a people problem. So that's where you need to start. Did I answer your question? That's good?
How would you choose a manager to make sure that he can apply the system?
Yeah, so what traits do I look for in a manager that's gonna apply the system? I think the key there is that they need to have high EQ. I think it's really important that leaders understand that they're working with people. Just like when we're writing code, we're not writing code for machines, we're writing code for people, right? And then, yeah, outside of that, they should be a good writer. I think it's important. You're gonna be doing a lot of writing, a lot of documentation. And maybe the third point, I don't have a third point, but yeah. Yeah, someone that you can talk to, right? You need to be able to talk to people.
We got one more question here.
Okay.
You, sir?
Hey, Steve. The guy in the front stole my question.
Okay.
But I have a backup, which is you gave a lot of great references to a lot of good books.
Yeah.
Half of which I've read.
Yeah.
Do you have a link somewhere to all these great management books that you listed that we can consume?
Yeah, so lnk.bio/Steve Tauber. There's a link to the free range management book. And also on GitHub, you can click the link there on that same website. I always upload all my slides to GitHub. So you can find the slides for Shift, and then you can download the slides, and then I have a reference page with all the million references here. So you can check it out. And that's the website. Cool. Thanks for your time. I appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of the conference.